The Essex Junto was a shadowy group of Federalists who nearly tore the United States apart in its earliest years. Disillusioned by what they saw as a government dominated by Southern and Western interests, these New England elites secretly plotted to secede and create their own nation. Their story is one of political intrigue, failed alliances, and the fragility of America's young democracy. This is the tale of how one group sought to reshape the nation in their image. The Essex Junto was formed in the late 18th century in Essex County, Massachusetts, during a time of growing political division in the United States. This group consisted of influential Federalists including Timothy Pickering, George Cabot, and Fisher Ames, who shared a deep dissatisfaction with the direction of the country under the Democratic Republican leadership. They believed that the principles of federalism, strong centralized government, close ties to Britain, and an elite-led economy were being eroded by populist policies. At the heart of their concerns was the growing power of Southern and Western states. The Democratic Republican Party, led by Thomas Jefferson, had gained significant influence, promoting agricultural expansion and policies that they believed sidelined New England's mercantile economy. The Essex Junto feared that the balance of power was shifting permanently away from their region. The Junto operated largely behind the scenes, using their wealth and political connections to influence public opinion and legislative decisions. While they portrayed themselves as defenders of the Constitution and American values, they were increasingly viewed by outsiders as a faction that prioritized regional interests over national unity. Their grievances were not just political but also cultural. They saw themselves as the guardians of an older, more disciplined America, contrasting with what they perceived as the chaotic individualism spreading from the South and West. This sense of superiority fueled their belief that New England might be better off as an independent confederation, sparking discussions that would eventually lead to whispers of secession. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 was a turning point that deepened the Essex Junto's fears about the direction of the United States. This monumental land deal, brokered by President Thomas Jefferson, doubled the size of the country by acquiring vast western territories from France. While celebrated by many as a triumph of diplomacy, the Essex Junto viewed it as a disastrous blow to New England's influence. Their concerns were both political and economic. With western territories open for settlement, the Essex Junto feared the rise of new states that would align with the Democratic Republican policies. They believed that this expansion would further marginalize New England, whose mercantile economy depended on trade rather than agriculture. In their view, Jefferson's vision of a nation dominated by independent farmers posed a direct threat to New England's way of life. The Junto also questioned the constitutionality of the Louisiana Purchase. Federalists had long advocated for a strict interpretation of the Constitution, and they argued that it did not grant the president the authority to buy land. They saw Jefferson's action as a dangerous precedent for unchecked executive power, further eroding the principles they claimed to defend. This growing frustration led the Essex Junto to escalate their rhetoric. Some members began suggesting that New England would be better off breaking away from the Union altogether. They argued that an independent confederation could protect their region's economic and political interests. The Louisiana Purchase, in their eyes, symbolized a nation slipping further from the ideas of its founders. As these frustrations boiled over, the Junto began to seek allies who could help turn their vision of secession into a reality. Their attention soon turned to a controversial and ambitious figure, Aaron Burr. By the early 1800s, the Essex Junto had moved frustration to action. Their discussions about secession took a serious turn when they sought to recruit Aaron Burr, a former vice president and controversial figure in American politics. Burr, disgraced after his infamous duel with Alexander Hamilton in 1804, was eager to reclaim power and influence. His ambition and estrangement from the Democratic Republican leadership made him an ideal candidate for the Junto's plan. The Essex Junto envisioned a Northern Confederacy that would include New England, New York, and possibly Canada. Burr was seen as a potential leader who could rally support and lend credibility to the movement. In 1804, they approached him with a bold proposition. If he could win the governorship of New York, he would play a central role in facilitating New York's secession from the United States. With New York on board, the plan for a breakaway confederation seemed achievable. Burr appeared receptive to the idea, viewing it as an opportunity to regain political relevance. However, his campaign for New York governor failed spectacularly, largely due to Hamilton's vehement opposition and accusations that Burr was a dangerous opportunist. This defeat not only shattered Burr's ambitions, but also dealt a severe blow to the Junto's plans. Without New York, their vision of a Northern Confederacy was untenable. The collapse of Burr's governorship bid and his subsequent legal troubles after the duel with Hamilton left the Essex Junto without a leader or momentum. Their efforts to ally with Burr exposed their intentions to the broader public, deepening mistrust of Federalist elites and further isolating the group. With the Northern Confederacy plot in ruins, the Essex Junto retreated into the background, though their secessionist sentiments would resurface during the War of 1812. The War of 1812 reignited secessionist sentiments in New England, providing the Essex Junto with another opportunity to voice their discontent. The war, declared by President James Madison, was deeply unpopular in New England, where the economy depended heavily on trade with Britain. The region's Federalists viewed the conflict as a reckless and unnecessary move that disproportionately harmed their interests. This frustration culminated in the Hartford Convention of 1814 to 1815. The Hartford Convention brought together delegates from 5 New England states to discuss their grievances. While the Essex Junto was no longer as visible, their influence lingered in their discussions. The delegates condemned the war and proposed several constitutional amendments aimed at protecting New England's interests. These included requiring a 2/3 majority in Congress to declare war, admit new states, or impose trade restrictions. They also sought to limit presidential terms and bar successive presidents from the same state, a clear jab at the Virginia-dominated presidency. Behind closed doors, some of the convention reportedly discussed the possibility of New England secession. However, these ideas never gained widespread support among the delegates. Instead, they focused on pressing reforms within the Union. Despite this moderation, rumors of treasonous intent spread quickly, fueled by the Federalists' vocal opposition to the war. The timing of the Hartford Convention proved disastrous for the Federalists. Just as the delegates prepared to present their demands, news arrived of the U.S. victory of the Battle of New Orleans and the signing of the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the war. The Federalists were ridiculed as unpatriotic and disloyal, effectively marking the end of their political influence. The Essex Junto's legacy of secessionist sentiment faded, but the Hartford Convention remained a stark reminder of the tensions that threatened the nation's unity. The Essex Junto and their secessionist ideas left a lasting imprint on American politics. Their actions revealed the fragility of the United States during its formative years, when regional tensions frequently threatened national unity. Although their efforts ultimately failed, they exposed the deep divides between New England and other regions of the country. One significant legacy of the Essex Junto was the association of federalism with disloyalty. The group's plotting, coupled with the Hartford Convention's ill-timed demands, dealt a fatal blow to the Federalist Party. Once a dominant political force, the party rapidly declined after the War of 1812, leaving the Democratic Republicans unchallenged for years. The stigma of secession and the disunion haunted Federalists and ensured their political marginalization. The Supreme Court's growing authority during this period also played a role in dampening secessionist ambitions. Cases like McCulloch v. Maryland and others reinforced the idea of strong federal government, limiting the ability of individual states or regions to break away from the Union. These legal precedents began to build the framework for resolving sectional disputes without resorting to disunion. Perhaps most importantly, the Essex Junto's ideas foreshadowed future sectional crises. The tensions they highlighted, regional economic differences, fears of political marginalization, and dissatisfaction with federal policies, would resurface decades later during the lead up to the Civil War. While the Essex Junto's vision of a Northern Confederacy never materialized, their actions remained a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing regional interests over national unity.